Hello, Aubrey. What's shaking? How's it going
Hi.
today?
I'm great, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. What are we getting into today on All Ears English on our Saturday episode?
Yes, I have a question to start us off. What is something that bothers you?
I think when it comes to because we do a lot of remote work, and I think writing a time without a time zone bothers me.
Ooh,
When you like, for
yes.
example, I'm gonna do a guest recording with someone who's on the East Coast, but they write, "Let's meet at 9." I'm like,
Mm.
9 in what time zone? You know, you're not the center of the world, right? And so
That's such a good point. Especially in Arizona, because time zones throw me off all the time because we
right.
actually don't do daylight savings. So half the year I'm Pacific time, half the year I'm Mountain time. And I have made
Yes.
mistakes so many times with this. It's so crazy. I have to
Yes.
always write it in like Pacific Mountain and Eastern.
It's kind of I feel like it's equivalent to if someone doesn't speak another language outside of English, actually, just sort of the assumption that the world speaks this language, so there's no need to learn. A lot of Americans do unfortunately think that way. It's a similar mentality of this is how I work, this is how I operate, and the world kind of bends, right? And so we
Yes,
try to
you're
get away
so
from
right.
that.
The same
Yeah.
idea, like, everyone's on the same time zone as me. No, that's not the way the world works.
Yeah, yeah. So that is the thing that bothers me. What's something for you, Aubrey, that what would you say differently if I asked you what is something that upsets you? Something
Ooh,
differently.
good question. Um, I think I get really upset if someone is treated unfairly, whether it's
Mhm.
someone I know or one of
Mhm.
my children or myself. Like if there's
Mhm.
injustice in some way, I get
Mm.
really upset to the point where
Hmm.
I feel like I need to do something, I need to make a difference, right? This
Interesting.
is going to be
Yes.
interesting today. We got a really good question about because this is different. If you ask someone, what's something that upsets you, what's something that bothers you, or what's something you find disturbing, there would be
Yes.
very different answers to these three questions.
Right. Because hopefully our listeners notice that difference, right? My thing that bothers me is a little bit of a gripe, a little bit of a pet peeve,
Yes.
but
Ooh, I love
it's
the word
not
gripe.
yeah,
Yes,
gripe.
right. Just something kind of annoying, something that bothers you, but you're not
It's
upset
not
by it.
upsetting. It's not something that's gonna keep me up at night or that
Right.
I'm gonna, really be truly angry or upset about, but injustice, maybe world hunger, uh,
Yes.
violence, those are
Bigger
upsetting
things.
things, right?
Absolutely. And this is such a great way to deepen connections in English, to have these conversations, to ask people what upsets them, what bothers them. And so I'm excited to dive into this vocabulary to give you all of these excellent questions to ask
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah, this is really what's gonna help our listeners distinguish themselves between the B1 up to the B2 level, moving into C1, right, Aubrey?
Yes. Oh, for
Is
sure.
knowing the differences between these smaller, nouns, adjectives, verbs, but there are big differences here, right?
Yes, exactly. And we
Yes.
share that here on All Ears English, right? Connection, not perfection. So be sure that you are following if you feel that way as well. And you want to know these little nuances, this vocabulary that can push you from B1 to C1. Need to make sure you're following the All Ears English podcast.
Yes, and we love your questions, guys. You can send your questions to our team. You can send them to Lindsay at allearsenglish.com. We love getting your questions. This one is from Eduardo. And Eduardo just asks, what's the difference between bother, disturb, and upset?
Yes, I'm excited to dive into this because they are very different and they can be super confusing because some of
Hmm.
them, might be just a verb, some are verb and noun, some are also an adjective.
Oh
Like
my
it's
gosh.
a little crazy.
Okay. Well, then I think we better maximize our time here, Aubrey, and jump right into it. So, are we starting with bother today? Shall we start
Yes.
there? Okay.
Starting with bother as a verb, because it is
Okay.
also a noun, but as a verb, it has three separate meanings. The first one is like to take the trouble to do something. For example, you might say, don't bother with the luggage. We'll get to it later if you don't want to
Mm.
unpack the car yet.
Super common and natural. Often people just say, "Oh, don't bother."
Hmm.
And then they stop. They're just saying, "Don't inconvenience yourself. I don't wanna
Exactly.
inconvenience you, so I'm saying don't bother." Right?
Right. I say this all the time. Like instead of, because it almost seems strange to say, like, don't do that right now. Like, I just kind of think
Yeah.
a better way to convey that, like, oh, don't bother. Don't worry about
Mm.
it is another way to say it. Don't worry about it. Don't bother.
Yeah, but bother I like better almost, right? It's
Yes, I
kind
do
of
too.
yeah. Or another
Friendly.
example yeah, it's more friendly. It's kind of more emphasizing that you don't want the other person to feel they're being inconvenienced a little bit,
Right.
right?
And the second meaning is very similar to that one. And it means more like to not feel concern about or be interested about something. So you might say, don't bother about me. Like if someone's like, how are you going to get home? Oh, don't bother about me. I'll get an Uber when I'm ready to go home.
Oh, that's another one I'm not as used to. Interesting. Okay.
So very
Ah.
similar to worry. It was like, oh, don't worry about
Yeah,
me.
don't
I'll
worry about
figure it
me.
out. So very
Yeah.
similar to that first meaning.
I would say in that case, don't worry about me, or it's all good, or I've got it under control, something like that.
Right.
Love it. Or the next one would be worry, disturb, or upset. Like, what's a social issue that bothers you? Right? We talked
Yes.
about that at the top. Um,
And this is
Interesting.
tricky. This is where these 3 words are really confusing people because this is the meaning where they're more interchangeable, where you
I
could say, either upset, disturb, or worry. Like, what's a social issue that really bothers you, really worries you, really disturbs you, really upsets you? Like, that's where they cross over, where they have a very similar meaning. But then for each of these words, there are all these other meanings, these other, depending on the context. So you need to know,
Yeah.
be familiar with all of them.
Yeah, I think the key is that bother is more broad. So at the top of the show, we emphasized that bother should be for smaller things. But when it comes to bigger issues, it's upset you, what upsets you or disturbs you. But you can still say world hunger really bothers me and it upsets me. But bother you could also use for like a fly buzzing in your ear.
For
This
sure, right? It
fly
could be
is really
something
bothering
small.
me.
And I really
Yeah,
noticed your intonation change though. If you're going to use bother for something big like this, the way you
right.
said it, Lindsay, was right to say like, this really bothers me. And then
Mm,
with our intonation, we're sharing it upsets me, right? If we said
mm.
like, yeah, that really bothers me, then our
Oh, that's
intonation is showing like, no, that's more like the fly buzzing in the ear.
Oh, that's a good point. So it's all about some of these words are diverse. They can be used in different ways, guys, for different levels of gravity, but it depends on your tone of voice. That sounds like that's what we're
Absolutely.
saying. Is that right,
Yeah,
Aubrey?
for sure. Yes. So
Mm,
interesting. So then bother is also a noun. So let's dive into that. It can mean like effort, difficulty, or worry. For example, you might say, she saved me the bother of picking up flowers and balloons, right? That means she did it for me. She saved me the bother.
right. This could also be, she saved me the annoyance of, the
Right.
inconvenience of, right? The worry of. Sure, that works. Hmm.
And then we also use it also means a person or thing that causes annoyance, right? And we were kind of talking about this earlier a little bit where you might be like, I'm sorry I'm being a bother, or don't be a bother. We're using it as a noun here to call someone sort of like an annoyance.
Yeah, it reminds me we talked about busybodies a few months ago on the show, right? If you have someone in your neighborhood who's always kind of looking to see if you're in check with the HOA rules, that sort of thing, that comes to mind when I think about being a bother, right?
Right? Imagine going to their friend and be like, sorry to be a bother, but would you mind painting your house? The
Right.
paint's flaking. It looks
Oh my
terrible.
gosh. We live in a set of townhouses, 4 townhouses all connected, and we tried to match the paint, but it ended up being way more green and
Oh
everyone
no.
else is kind of like a blue gray or purple gray. And I've seen people from the city coming and taking photos and I'm like, "Uh-oh, I think we're going to get a letter or
Oh,
something."
no. We got a letter, and I think it was actually intended for a neighbor that they did their paint was peeling, and we got a letter saying, "You need to paint." We're like, "Rude."
That's so
But,
funny.
that's how it is when there's a strict HOA, right? Then they
Yeah.
then
It's
they
funny because
bother you about things like
they
that.
bother you. We don't even have an HOA, but I think the city might be disturbed with how bad it looks. So we're gonna have to paint over that. There's gonna be a painting Saturday coming up in my
Right.
future, I could tell.
Have
Anyways.
fun.
All right, Aubrey, we are back from a little break. Let's go into disturb.
Okay, this is the only one of the 3 words we're talking about today that's only a verb. The noun is disturbance. So when you use the disturb, it's just a verb, and there's 2 meanings. The
Mhm.
first one is to interfere with the normal functioning or arrangement of something. We often will just say this chunk, sorry to disturb you.
I like that. So I might use this. Like, for example, I was in California last weekend and I had to go knock on the neighbor's door to get some sugar and some water. And I might have said that. And I knocked on their door, sorry to disturb you. Right. But do you
Can I
have any
borrow some
sugar?
sugar? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. I feel
Yeah.
like I almost always will say this when it's someone I don't know, it's a stranger, and I feel like I might be disturbing them, you know? We
Yeah.
we might also say, "Sorry to bother you," but
Right.
I feel like this chunk is so common. Just be like, "Sorry to
Sure.
disturb you."
It's good to have both, right?
Yeah, for
We need
sure.
Variety, yeah, and
Yeah, and
then
you might say, surprisingly, the noise didn't disturb his sleep because, yeah, we're
mhm.
talking about anything that interferes with the normal process of something. So we'll often say, like, that something disturbs your sleep if you wake up, if you're interrupted with that.
Yeah, and then sometimes you see signs up. Where would you see a do not disturb sign? I'm trying to think.
At a hotel, right? You put the do
Oh,
not
oh, yeah,
disturb
yeah, yeah, of
sign on the
course,
door if you
of
don't want
course.
housekeeping to come in when you're there, right? Do not disturb
Yeah, I
sign.
always do that. Yeah, for sure. No, that makes total sense. Do not disturb sign. That is the one place where you would see that. Isn't a
For
hotel is the
sure.
most common.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then to cause someone to feel anxious. This is kind of
Yes.
more in line with bothered, upset at the top of the show,
Yes,
right?
exactly, but it is, I feel like, a little heavier. Like, if I say I was disturbed by a film, this means I wouldn't say, like, I was bothered, I was upset. This means it was a deeper level. Like, I felt
Just
anxious, I felt really uncomfortable if I felt
yeah.
disturbed, right? I might say that I was disturbed by that film.
Yeah, or I found the news article to be disturbing. Is there any recent movie or news article that you've read, Aubrey, recently,
I mean, I
that
feel
you
like
find
every day that
disturbing?
I read the news, I find something disturbing, right? Every news article I read
Yeah,
about the
pretty
war in
much.
Ukraine or,
Mhm.
even local immigration here in Arizona, like, I every single time I read a news article, I'm disturbed. I find it disturbing.
I know, that's why I try to watch the cooking
Yeah,
channel
right, just avoid reading
sometimes.
the news. Put your head in the sand like an ostrich.
No, but I still
It's
wanna know
tempting.
what's going on. Like, I was reading in the New York Times last night that colon cancer is increasing among 20s, 30s, 40s, and they're trying to figure out why,
Oh,
right? Like, it
wow,
used to
yeah.
be people older in their 50s, 60s, and now it's spreading into younger generations, and it's weird. Is it diet? Is it
Mm,
environment? What is it? So that's
I
kinda
know.
disturbing. Yeah.
Lindsay, we're of the age we have to go get a check, right?
Yeah, for
We're getting
sure.
there.
Great topic for the
I
podcast.
know. I actually just met yesterday, I was playing pickleball and I met a young man, he was kind of like a teenager, and I asked his name and he said Colin, and I was like, "Colin?" And he said, "No, colon, but it's spelled like Colin." I was so shocked. I'm like, "Who would name their child
Interesting.
Colin?" That's not a
Interesting.
body part I would not wanna be named
Was
after.
he from the US or
Yeah,
was
he's from the
he
US.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. 'Cause it sounds like a British accent saying Colin to me, but no, from the
No, he wasn't
US.
even British. I don't know. I kinda wanted to talk to
Okay.
his parents,
Huh,
be like, "What were you thinking?" But
interesting. Well,
that
there's
being
a
said,
famous
to each their own, but sometimes you wanna think about, like, what other words, what other things does this mean before you name someone that?
well, there's a famous is it basketball, baseball? I think there's a famous baseball player named Kale,
Oh, my
Kale.
nephew's name is Kale. It's
Oh,
spelled
okay.
Kael, but yeah, I told my sister, I'm like, "That's a vegetable, right?"
Interesting.
But then I told someone this story and they're like, "Well, Colin Powell." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's not Colin
Colon.
Powell, it's
That's
Colin Powell."
true. Ooh, that's a
That's
good point. So all of a
fascinating.
sudden it's
Never even
okay
thought
because
about it. I
yeah,
thought all of a
he's
sudden
so
it's okay because
famous.
Colin
It's
Powell's
okay
name.
and very well
So funny.
respected. All right. All right, let's move into number 3. So upset. Okay. What do we do
Yeah.
with this one?
So this is the trickiest because it's a verb, noun, and an adjective. So first we'll talk about verb. It can mean to make someone unhappy or disappointed or worried, like the
Mhm.
news upset her or she was upset by the news.
Yeah, again, concerned, disturbed, doesn't feel good, right?
Right,
Maybe
exactly.
in some cases you cry. Sometimes, when you become upset, you might be emotional, right?
Yeah, I do feel like this does imply that you're more emotionally affected, especially than like bother.
Yeah, of
Verb,
course.
that would be more like I was made really uncomfortable. Upset is most likely to be causing an emotional reaction or making you sad or angry.
Yeah, and this next one, we have it here to show you. I don't use it this way. To knock something over, the cat upset a bowl of milk. I would just say knocked over a bowl of milk. Do you say that? The cat upset a
I
bowl of
don't,
milk?
nope, it's not in my
Okay.
daily conversations
Yeah.
as well. I certainly hear it, I see it, I read it more often than not. You'll
Hmm.
see it in, like, books. Something was upset, meaning it got knocked over, but we don't
Yeah.
use this much in day-to-day conversation.
Love it. Okay. And then as a noun, what can it be as a
Yeah.
noun?
So there was another meaning that I'm like, "We're not gonna worry about that because kinda like upset the bowl of milk, we just never use it." But this one you will hear.
This one you
It's like
will.
an unexpected result, especially in sports, to say, "It was a huge upset when ASU's football team beat U of A," means like somebody else was expected to win and unexpectedly the other person won.
Yeah, but it's super important with the pronunciation here, right? It's huge upset. As
Good
opposed
point.
to
Usually we
saying,
emphasize the second syllable, right? Upset when we're talking
mhm.
about what's the verb or the feeling. And then
Yeah.
for this noun, we emphasize that first syllable, upset.
It was not this is used a lot in the sport of tennis, right? If
Mhm.
the number 200 seed comes in and beats the number 1 seed, that's a big upset. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. And then last, as an adjective, we hear this all the time, unhappy, disappointed, or worried. She looked upset when she left the interview.
Mhm. Or you can have an upset stomach, right? Sometimes people have digestion issues, and maybe if they like people have gluten intolerances or wheat intolerances. Do you have anything like that, Aubrey? Or are you
I
pretty
don't have any
good?
intolerances like that, but I do say this, like, if ever I just feel sick to my stomach, I'll say, "Oh, I have an upset stomach." I feel like
Yeah.
it's almost like a classier, more polite way to say that. Instead, we avoid using the word sick because then people think
Yeah.
we're gonna spread it. We just say, "Oh, I have an upset stomach." No
Uh,
big deal.
interesting. All right, guys, we've given you a lot of examples. So let's go ahead and see how these play out in a real conversation. Yeah.
Yes, this role play, you and I are on vacation with friends. I'll start us out.
Okay.
I hope my snoring didn't disturb you last night.
Oh, I didn't even notice, but it wouldn't have bothered me. I can sleep through anything.
Oh, good. I always worry someone will be upset, though, if it keeps them awake.
Hey, want to go to the Padres game? I think it's going to be an upset.
No, but you go ahead. Don't bother about me. I've got a bit of an upset stomach, so I'll just stay here and take it easy.
Nice, nice. I think there's something kind of humble about that, right? Don't bother about me. It's not natural. It's not in my conversational repertoire, but it sounds like, hey, don't worry. It sounds kind and just don't yeah, just
I
taking the
agree.
pressure off of
I don't
people.
think to use it that often. I hear it sometimes for sure. Like I understand what's meant, but I
Hmm.
almost feel like I should use it more because it is, like you said, it takes the pressure off. It's pretty polite. But
Hmm.
I always will opt for don't worry about me. Don't worry about me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so here, Aubrey, first you said, I hope my snoring didn't disturb you, meaning didn't wake you up, didn't annoy you, right?
Yes, exactly, and I will use this, "Oh, I hope I didn't disturb you," and then
Hmm.
I
It's
said
polite.
or you said, "I didn't even notice, but it wouldn't have bothered me," right? So you're like, "No, I didn't notice, but even if I had, I wouldn't have been bothered."
Now, would we ever say it wouldn't have upset me? Probably not,
Ooh, that's
right?
interesting to think because that would definitely change the meaning. That feels too, like
Too
it would
heavy?
be strange to almost talk about something making you emotional, like, no, somebody
It's
snoring,
too heavy.
that's
It's
pretty
too much.
extreme. You're like, "That might have
Yeah.
upset me." No,
No.
bothers me
Mm-mm.
or it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. And then what? Aubrey, what'd you say after
But
that?
then this is interesting because there here I'm bringing it up a level to say, like,
Oh,
I do
interesting.
worry that someone will be upset if it keeps them awake. Because that's the thing, if you're we've up leveled the seriousness here because it's not just that someone's bothered by snoring. They might be upset if they're awake for hours in the same room as someone snoring. Then, like, okay, we're getting to a level of frustration and emotion
Yeah, it's more like the next day they'll be angry that they didn't sleep.
because they're sleep
That's
deprived.
yeah,
Right.
exactly, exactly. Then we go into the sports concept of an
Mm,
upset competition concept. Oh, want to go to the Padres game? I said, oh, I think it's going to be an upset. That means I think that
exactly.
the underdog is going to win.
Ooh, I love that word underdog too. I always root
Mhm.
for an underdog, don't you? It's
Yeah,
fun.
I think we could do another episode on that
Yes,
concept.
we
I
should.
think in American culture, there's like a bias towards the underdog. I would say that's kind of a cultural thing in a
Yeah,
way.
for sure. And then I said,
Mhm.
"Don't bother about me," meaning like, "Don't worry about me, I'll figure it out." And I said, "I've got a bit of an upset stomach." I love
Mm.
all of these words. I think this is such a great way to connect, to ask people what bothers them, what upsets them. This is really you're getting deeper with someone about things that really mean something to them.
And it's another identity episode where you can share, I mean, there's so many sort of social issues going on in the world, but some issues upset certain people more than others and other ones upset other people. And so you can say a lot about who you are by
Yes.
saying what truly upsets you. Is it the environment? Is it human rights? Is it hunger? What is it?
And
Right?
it sends such a message to the person you're talking to that you really care about them and what matters to them when you bring this up in a conversation.
Interesting. Okay, good stuff today, guys. Hit follow if you love our style, especially now that we've added Saturday episodes. You can get 5 episodes a week on All Ears English. So hit that follow button today. And Aubrey, I will see you in the next episode.
Yes, awesome. See you next time.
You take care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.